This episode of the Multiracialverse podcast is brought to you by Eviton Couture, a brand born from a powerful vision and a deep connection to heritage. Founded by Shinnecock brothers Jason Tech King and Wayon Moon Smith, Eviton represents resilience and pride. From handmade tie-dye to wellness-focused athletic wear, each piece is crafted with intention and positivity, smudged with sage for good vibes, and delivered to you with love. Join the Eviton family on their journey of empowerment and inspiration. Hit up Moon on Instagram at Eviton_KS. That is native spelled backwards _KS to view product and place an order. Eviton Couture. Feel the spirit of resilience in every stitch.
I think another thing that really motivates me again is, really wanting to dismantle stigma, societal stigma, and also the stigma that we developed internally that turns into shame. Because I've had so much shame that I've experienced from being not Black enough, not white enough, from being blind, from not coming from money, from having anxiety, which most people didn't even think was a real thing. Yeah. And so, it's definitely been my own personal experiences too, that I did not enjoy feeling the way I did for many years. And so I want to really create a platform to help other people be able to overcome some of those things.
Welcome back to part 2 of episode 20. Let's continue our riveting conversation with Teisha Gillespie.
When I was 22, my partner and I were doing this road trip. We were 22, so we were able to do kind of like overnight. We were driving to Kentucky from Maryland, so we had to go through West Virginia. And again, my partner gets pulled over for speeding. Again, it's probably 1 or 2 in the morning, so no one's on the road. I like to describe him as Andy Griffin, only because he had that super thick Southern accent. Yeah. And comes to my side and, rolls down the window and he's like, you've been speeding, ticket, blah, 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 looks at me and starts questioning me too. Where are you going? Making sure that we're going to have the same story or whatever. And notices again, I can't make eye contact. And then so he actually shines this bright light into my face and is like, ma'am, please look at me. Please look. Why are you looking at me? And I end up having to, give him my ID. Again, I don't even have a driver's license because I can't physically drive. And he goes to run a report on me to see if I have a criminal record. And it's not until he comes back and my partner pulls out my handicap placard and says, sir, she's blind. And then of course he gets just stumbling all over himself and rips up the ticket, but it should never even had to come to that. Yeah. So I will say yes. And I will say, it's not just because I couldn't make eye contact, but if I had happened to be, a blonde hair, blue eye, white female, would that have even been a situation? I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have. I think because I had the disability, they didn't know what it was. And then I also happen to be brown, whether they think I'm Black or I'm Latinx Hispanic. Yeah. I think that definitely played into the treatment that I received both of those times. And so, unfortunately, it goes overlooked, so many people, whatever the disability is, the tragedy rate, the abuse rate of people who are brown or Black and who also have a disability, whether it be autism, ADHD, anything, is so much higher that unfortunately than people who are white and have disabilities. There, that intersectionality, it's unfortunately very true that it's very impactful and sometimes in the most horrible ways possible.
Yeah, that's so unfortunate. And I'm glad things, like your podcast and just I think society's ability now to look at disabilities or different capabilities more openly and provide, tools and resources and language for those is hopefully going to change that. I had heard that statistic too, I think just from the perspective of somebody with a disability in incarceration, like it's crazy high, like the amount of abuse and even other things worse than, like death of individuals who, are have a disability and are incarcerated. So
yeah, and if I can say something too quickly, this is on a state by state cases. And I only know this because here in Virginia, where I live, I volunteer for the National Federation of the Blind of Virginia. And so a lot of people, what we do is advocacy and, try to impact legislation. And not until just a couple of months ago did blind people actually have legal rights to have someone who was not a fellow incarcerated person help them fill out paperwork. Wow. So up until a few months ago, if you were blind and you could not see to fill out paperwork, you had to rely on another inmate to help you fill out that paperwork.
Wow.
That for obvious reasons is so wrong. But, you should never, ever have to do that. Because, oftentimes you can't necessarily trust other people. We just recently got that law passed. So I definitely encourage people to look within their own state when it comes to incarceration in prisons, whether or not that's a right or if there's a law currently protecting you from that.
Is there a place where people can find that information, or is it a specific, like, say, for instance, if they start with the place that the site that your state has created, what site is that?
So mine is, I specifically for Virginia. So, nfbv.org is, this, but that's specifically for Virginia. But I would definitely recommend them, whatever their local state government website is, to go there, and search. Or you could probably just do a quick Google search now. You have like generative AI helping to summarize things for you.
Yeah. So how has your visual disability, along with being multiracial, how has that impacted your outlook on life, your interactions with other people? Do you think it's made you like automatically more accepting to individuals based on the fact that, like, you might be interacting with somebody, but you might not, be able to make out, what ethnicity this individual is, or if they have a disability or other things. Please share how these two things, these intersectionalities have impacted your experience.
I like to think so. I personally, especially over the years, there was definitely a lot of unlearning I had to do, especially when it came to race, based off some of the things that I've shared about how I was raised. But I also think, going through my own journey of discovering certain things, especially my anxiety, which I felt a lot of judgment for as well for many years, it's definitely made me so much more open-minded. And I'm naturally a very curious person. So I'm always curious about where someone is from, like what their traditions are, what their life story is. Because one, I think there's just so much beauty in differences, but then also I think there's so much power in relatability. And so, I've just always been super open-minded. Well, I don't want to say always, but at least very, in recent years have been very open-minded to that. But I will also say that it's also made me, because I've, kind of dedicated myself to learning more about certain conditions, it's almost made me more aware of when someone potentially has a condition, whether it be autism or ADHD. I can pick up on it more. And it's kind of more of that like sixth sense, because, sometimes people give away visual cues or body language to tell them that maybe they are managing a condition. And I can't pick up on that. But when it comes to race, I would say, because I'm so curious and so interested in finding people who are so different from me, that has definitely helped me naturally gravitate toward multiple different types of people. Like I said, two of my best friends, one's Colombian, one's Peruvian. I have so many friends who are from India, so many friends who identify on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And not to just say, oh, like, yeah, I have a friend who's ... But I really intentionally try to surround myself with so many people who are different from myself, because I honestly believe that that's just the beauty of life and humankind, to just be like, there's no fun in just being around people who are just like you. It's boring.
Yes, exactly. And that's probably why we seek out these types of, we seek out individuals who have these diverse, complex stories and backgrounds and journeys. And it's fascinating too. And it's fascinating to, listen to their stories and talk about the inspirational things that they're doing, regardless of where they're at in life. So, what keeps you motivated and inspired? Because I was thinking about it. You're doing the work too that you do for this organization you just mentioned. Being introverted, having not even possibly having absent parents, having a visual disability, and you're right. In the 90s, we didn't talk about a lot of stuff. There wasn't just not the language, but we didn't even try. What has kept Teisha motivated to do the things that you've done post college? And let's start talking a little bit about those, like your career, like getting into the career field that you got into, and we'll talk then about your podcast.
So I think, again, I'm the oldest of 7 children, and so not only was I kind of forced to play that mother role a lot of the time, but just naturally, I love my sisters. I always want the best for them. And so I kind of felt that pressure. They call it oldest sibling syndrome, and I really think it's a real thing. But I always wanted to be a role model. I've always kind of been a mentor for them, or tried to be, share advice. And so I think that that's one thing that really drove me to really want to do well in school, go to college, get a good career, to just show them what was possible, especially because we grew up with not a lot of money, not a stable household. And so I think that's part of it. And then also part of it, not ever really having someone who looked like me when I was younger, who was both blind and also multiracial. I never had that person. And another thing that kind of really drives me is thinking about younger generations and, how can I potentially be that person for someone else that I never had? And so I got involved with the National Federation of the Blind of Virginia, firstly as a student mentor, working with high school students to really help them build key skills like self-advocacy, independence, resilience, kind of help upskill them for employment. I never had that. I don't think most kids, regardless if you have a disability, regardless if you have money, I think most kids probably are not specifically taught those skills and how to build those skills.
True.
And so that's kind of how I initially got involved in that organization. And again, part of that's through storytelling. And so marketing in particular, that's the profession I've been in now for 13 years. That's just kind of my, I guess, weirdness in a way that, the main reason why I got into marketing is because it really helped me both use my creative skills, but also my analytical skills. So I'm definitely a right and left side of the brain person. And, I love, marketing is kind of looking at, like we were talking about, the data and metrics and, being able to see whether things are working or not. But then it's also like creating pretty things or writing pretty words and finding kind of clever ways to persuade people to do something. And so, that was something that I struggled with a little bit early on in my career. I was actually one of my earlier jobs was as a copywriter for an ad agency. So I was writing copy ads for TV and radio, which was so fun. That was really fun to be able to do that. But back in like 2011, 2012, there was not the sophistication that we have today where I could actually know, okay, how many people heard my ad? Okay, did they actually take the action? Did they sign up for Comcast? Did they do this thing? I had no idea, and that drove me so crazy not knowing like what if I was being impactful in what I was doing. So then I ended up moving into the digital marketing space where you can track nearly everything. And today you can actually track TV and radio ads way more than what you could before.
Yeah.
So for me, total right and left brain. And so I really just enjoyed being able to kind of grow and try out different things in marketing. My career has really encompassed so much. So not just the copywriting, but also running digital ad campaigns on social media and running campaigns on Google and other places. And then also doing what's called search engine optimization or website optimization, and really helping to make sure that your website is showing up when people are doing searches for things related to your business, and creating content, whether that's for a blog or for social media. And even, diving in and specifically doing what's called like lead generation, and helping businesses, target other businesses, whether they're selling software. I've worked a lot for software and technology companies, and have spent the last 6 years specifically working in the education technology space. Okay. Which again is something that I really value, because I think the reason I value education so much is because it's really what helps me advance myself. I think without education, I don't think I'd be where I am today. And I'm definitely one who can give a lot of criticism to structured higher education institutions. There's so much that you can say toward those, not least being the cost of them. But sure. I do definitely think that without education, I would not be where I am. I would not have the leg up that I am. There's so many people who grow up with not a lot of money, people who grow up with disabilities, and they quote unquote don't do anything with their lives. And for me, that was really helpful. And so again, it kind of goes back to making that impact. And now it's really just making an impact in the nonprofit world, or making an impact for indirectly by doing marketing for education companies so that they can connect with people who need education solutions.
That's awesome.
And so it's, when thinking about that, my career, and then the intersection between that and my race and my disability, it hasn't necessarily been the easiest road to get to where I am. And then also being a female too. When I entered the marketing space, I mean, it's still today sometimes, but definitely back then, widely dominated by white straight males.
Yeah.
Marketing was not an easy thing for females to get into, let alone a Black disabled female. And so, I definitely faced some discrimination when it came to pay equity. And I had to quickly learn how to advocate for myself and negotiate. And I would say that, there was one scenario where I learned accidentally that my white male counterpart was making 40% more than me, but we were doing the same exact job. And I tell you, that pissed me off, and that should really piss off anyone. It should piss you off. And I went and I tried to advocate to my VP for a raise, and they turned me down. So I went and found another job that paid me 40% more.
That's awesome.
And I've never backed down for advocating for myself since. And, I would say that that's like one of the most important skills that I think people need to learn. And negotiating, I think, kind of falls into that self-advocacy piece. I think that's a skill, especially women are not taught. Because negotiating, it kind of infers that, you have confidence and you're strong. And, there's still some environments where women aren't supposed to be strong and confident. It's, and if you're a strong and confident woman, you're called the B word. Or something else. And so, definitely kind of thinking about younger generations, whether you're a female or if you're a brown or a Black female or a disabled female, I definitely would say, finding a way to advocate for yourself, knowing your rights, and also figuring out how to negotiate. I think those are definitely two big skills that I think are so valuable to have. They helped me very early on. And even advocating for yourself in terms of professional learning. I've never really had anyone who was willing to invest in me and teach me the ropes. I've in leadership too, I've really never had anyone who looked like me. I think one of my first jobs, I had a brown male supervisor, but ever since then, all of my supervisors have been white, mostly a mixture of male and female, but really no one there willing to kind of show me the ropes. And so I had to learn everything that I know today on my own, whether it was doing Google searches or like paying for my own courses and certifications. It's all been done on my own. So I think too, unfortunately, just relying on yourself, but having the drive and the discipline to do it, if no one is willing to help you along the way. But maybe you can find a mentor, because, that's something, again, I try to do. Whether you're Black, Hispanic, whatever, I do try to, anytime I hear someone, I only make this much money, or, I'm not happy in my job and I don't think I have the skills to transfer into this other career, that's something that I really try to do, is help others kind of realize their value and help teach them some of those negotiating skills or self-advocacy skills that I've learned along the way. Again, because it goes again back to me being that big sister mojo has always been with me. And, not just advocating for my sisters, but also advocating for others that I think, have gotten the short side of the stick in society sometimes. So I'm sorry, I feel like I've been rambling.
No, I'm going to say, just that is that's a pitch for you. I think you maybe have a calling too at some point as a life coach. It's super inspiring. That's why I was wondering, what keeps you motivated? Were there a lot of was education something that your mom talked about, or because of your visual disability, was your mom it's going to kind of your options for work or other things are going to be limited? But obviously, especially in something like marketing, which is mostly visual and other things, you've bucked that. So, how was that as far as people either telling you no, or your mom saying, no, you can't do that?
I would say that my mom didn't really encourage me in school. I wouldn't directly say she discouraged me in school, but I would say I got a lot more encouragement from my grandparents when it came to school. I was also the oldest, not just the oldest child in my household, but also the oldest grandchild. So, I wouldn't have admitted this before, but I was definitely kind of spoiled and, sometimes the favorite sometimes. So I kind of felt like they were yeah, you can do anything you want, Teisha, you can be president. So that was definitely I felt very lucky, kind of looking back, that was definitely something that was very lucky for me. But, once I kind of made it into the marketing world, aside from, being a female, from being biracial, there's definitely also been some challenges and hurdles I've had to face from digital accessibility, because marketing is very visual. Graphic design is something that I've really never been able to actually go into because I can't do it. And within marketing, you use so many tools and platforms, especially in digital marketing. And a lot of them over the years, they've not been super accessible. Thinking of me using a screen reader as I'm navigating through a browser or through a web application, there are many times when there's different components to something that are just not labeled, or that my screen reader can't pick up because the back-end coding was not coded in a way for a screen reader to be able to pick up. And it's not it's very hard to actually do it in a way that makes it accessible for people using screen readers. It's just that either one, people aren't educated in 508 compliance and how to make things accessible. Two, they had to bring something to market super quickly, and that just didn't get into the QA checklist that they had to do. Or three, they just don't care. And I hate saying that they just don't care, but money drives the world, and blind people are only 5% of the world. So why design for them? So that's definitely been very challenging, because a lot of times I've had to use these tools to do my job. And if I ran into a situation where I couldn't do something, it would cause me a lot of stress and anxiety that, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. I can't do this thing. But it also taught me, again, going back, I learned very quickly, I had to start sending in product requests to these companies and sending them, going to their help site and submitting these tickets saying, your thing does not work for me. Please work with your developers to fix this. Obviously, I never knew if this actually worked or not, but I was if you don't fix this, my company is not going to be a future customer of yours. And I was kind of talking out of my ass. But it would piss me off. I didn't like not being able to do something that other people could do. It can be very frustrating sometimes to just feel well, I can't do this. I can't do my job. Things are just going to get harder. So I would say digital accessibility has definitely been, other than kind of like the pay inequity and having to advocate for myself, that's definitely been a big thing that I've had to try to navigate.
Yeah. So who inspired you, or what inspired you on your path, either to your current career field and or including your podcast? Like, were there role models that you were like, oh, that person is like, I want to do what they're doing, and you either read about them, listen to their podcast or other things? I'm interested in where you get your inspiration from.
Yeah. Well, back in the day for marketing, it was actually Don Draper from Mad Men who found me interested. I was like, oh, wow, advertising. I never knew about advertising and copywriting. It just seems so fun. And I was like, oh, you can have like a bourbon fridge in your office. Cool. I mean, that didn't keep me going, of course. But yeah, I mean, it was just, I had actually never really known about the advertising world. And it was actually just the time that I went to school. There were no like digital marketing courses or things like that. Marketing was just kind of like this old fashioned way of doing business. And, when it comes to my podcast though, so kind of like the storytelling person in me has always been there. One of my first jobs, I was working for a publishing agency where I had the fortune of being able to interview small business owners and ask them and interview them about their story and how they got to where they are, and kind of talk about, how does running a family owned business, like how does that come into play? And like, what is your passion? Like, why did you open this antique shop? And like, we're like, get all these exquisite like treasures and all of these things. I just love being able to hear people's stories and then bring them to life through magazine articles. And so that's always been within me. And my career didn't really reflect that, but I wanted to find an outlet to be able to kind of get back to that hobby. And so the first podcast I ever listened to wasn't until 2019 when I suddenly found myself having to do a 3-hour round trip commute to work. And I had no idea what I was going to do on the metro. And so I was like, okay, let's find a podcast. A few months into that job, I came across a new podcast at the time called Work in Progress, hosted by Sophia Bush, who's one of my like favorite actresses, philanthropist. And she essentially interviewed these incredible people. Like think Gloria Steinem, Jon Favreau, like one of Obama's former speechwriters, Natalie Portman, Tig, like just Kurama from Queer Eye, just like these like really amazing like actors and comedians and feminists, and who we all know from, reading news articles or watching them on TV or what have you not. But what I really loved about the way she interviewed people is she really brought these people who we oftentimes put on pedestals and humanized them through these questions. And they would really dive deep into a lot of the adversities that they've had to face along the way and how they got to where they are today. And listening to those interviews really got me thinking that even though I'm not a celebrity, I've been so fortunate over the last 10 to 15 years to be able to acquaint and befriend just as equally incredible people who have just as incredible stories. And so that's kind of how I got started and where I came up with the name Not Your Average Goat, GOAT standing for greatest of all time, because everyone I bring on, I believe is this quote unquote average goat who other people should know about, because I think that their story is inspiring. It can be relatable. And so my the platform that I've created really has been to celebrate all the shapes, sizes, and colors of diversity as well as adversity. Again, to really celebrate all of our differences, but to shed light on the things that oftentimes give us fear or make us uncomfortable talking about it, the adversities, whether it's mental health, addiction, divorce, being the queer experience, having a disability. Like there's just so many elements to our journeys that pose adversities, and because of society or because of internal shame, we shy away from talking about them. And so I really try to create this platform where we can have vulnerable and authentic conversations about these real raw experiences to one, help others feel seen and understood, and maybe not alone for the first time in their life, because by not talking about them, people navigate and go through these experiences thinking they are the only ones who exist who have had this experience. And I would say 110% of the time that's not true, but it's just that people are too afraid to talk about it. And so I'm really trying to create this kind of experience where maybe someone listening who has an adjacent or an analogous experience hears this other person's story and they're like, wow, I went through that too. And like, I finally feel seen. And then there's this other component to it, this bigger societal mission where I'm trying to help dismantle the stigma that exists in society and the prejudice that exists in society when it comes to different diversity communities and different adverse experiences. So the story, the interviews that I do, there's kind of like this part personal journey exploration, and then kind of this part critical dialogue on these topics that really need to be talked about more.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. And of course, it kind of marries my passion for storytelling in it as well.
What has been your most memorable, if you have a moment that you remember from your podcast so far, share that, because I'd like people to get a little taste of the great conversations you have on there.
Yeah, one of them was with a friend that I had the pleasure of first working with, and then we became friends. And she lost her mom when she was 18 to suicide. And in her telling her story, she shares, growing up, her mom suffered from chronic vertigo. And when people think of vertigo, they probably just think about, oh, someone gets dizzy. But her mom truly lived with this constant feeling of dizziness and these constant migraines. And when you have migraines that just literally do not stop, it makes you mentally go crazy. And, we use this word crazy kind of loosely, but it really messes with your mind. And it put her mom into a really serious depression. And depression is a disability. I think, when you think about disabilities, mental health is on the spectrum of disabilities, and depression as well as anxiety falls into disabilities. And, she talks about how her mom went and sought disability assistance, and they basically laughed at her saying, oh, you want a disability check because you don't feel well today?
Wow.
And just no one ever took her seriously. And, there was really no cure for chronic vertigo. And so, when she was 18, her mom, out of desperation, ended up taking her own life.
Oh, man.
And, it wasn't just that in itself that was really hard for her, but she really tells a story and advocates for, those who are left behind from people who die from suicide. There's oftentimes this shame and this prejudice and this stigma for people who die from suicide. It's like, oh, it was their choice. They were selfish. It was weakness. And, if you tell someone, I lost my mom in a car accident, they have so much empathy for you. But if you say, oh, I lost my mom to suicide, it's like, oh. And, it can kind of be awkward. It can kind of be dismissive. And, there's also this idea that, people, depression isn't like a real disorder, and that, depression's always, just feeling bad, but you can make yourself feel better. And, oh, well, I actually heard this on this completely different episode interview that I did, but it's like someone was told her brother died from suicide that, oh, I get depressed sometimes, but I never kill myself. It's so stigmatized. And so we had this really deep conversation about how, the lack of support there is for families. On the other side of the suicide, there's a daughter, there's a son, there's a husband, there's a wife, there's cousins, there's all these people who are left and impacted, who suffer from mental health, from grieving. They grieve the same exact way from someone dying from cancer. But society doesn't count it the same. And I would say that was probably one of the most impactful, maybe one of the hardest conversations that I've ever had. Because, I'm very lucky that I've never had someone die from suicide. So I've never had that particular experience.
Sure.
But it's just, it was just one of those things that really set heavy in my heart after talking to her. I think it's still an issue. I mean, her mom died probably 14 years ago, but I still think it's an issue today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's super impactful. A lot of other great stories out there on your podcast. I always ask everyone, what's your recipe for world peace? I'm sure you have something.
Oh, tacos. That's my recipe.
That's a good one. I like that.
You know what, though? Food brings people together. Food is community. And you can make a taco. Of course, you can make a kind of traditional Mexican street taco. You can make an Asian taco. You can make a Turkish taco. You can make a Cajun taco. You can literally make a taco that reflects any and every single person in this world. And it's delicious. And it's the one thing that I think can truly bring differing people together. And of course you could have a bad food experience, like maybe the chicken's overdone or something like that. But that probably wasn't what you were looking for in terms of recipe to save the world.
If that's what...
I don't really know exactly what it is, but what I'm hoping to do with this podcast is, I've been so blessed, and this show is not about me at all. I don't want to be the face of the show. The face of the show truly is all the incredible people who I bring on the show. But I've been so blessed to have feedback. People come to me and say, "Hey, I just listened to this episode, and it really impacted me and made me think about my own journey as a father and accepting my spouse and my son for and how they manage their ADHD." Or, listening to this episode really made me think about how I was bullied as a kid, and that, I wasn't alone being adopted and being, ethnically diverse growing up in a majority white state. Mm-hmm. And, even getting comments mid-interview and people stopping and say, Teisha, this conversation has been so therapeutic for me. It's just, I think, I selfishly really enjoy hearing other people's stories, and I really never imagined that I would get those types of responses, because to me, I'm just asking people about their life. I kind of indirectly assume that maybe people who are coming on have already kind of digested their life experiences and have really kind of gone through that journey. But it's just interesting to see how people do kind of reflect mid-interview and say, wow, like, this has really made me think about my experiences in a different way. Or again, it was such a great experience just being able to talk to you and talk through my journey. Again, that kind of like that therapeutic remedy. So that's just been really pleasurable. And so I think just talking again, get a bunch of tacos and just sit around the table and talk about everything, no matter how. Actually, if it's hard to talk about, if it makes you uncomfortable, more of a reason to talk about it.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I feel the same way. And I'm so blessed that you graced us with your time for the last hour or so. You have an incredible story. You're doing incredible things, not only for yourself, but for many other individuals. Where can individuals find you online, and what would you like to promote?
Thank you. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Teisha Gillespie, and I'm sure you'll probably link to that in the show notes, but I always have to spell my name, both my first and my last name. My maiden name was Collins, and people knew how to spell that. But it's TeishaGillespie. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well as Threads and Instagram. I'm at Old Bay letter number 4 Evermore. I'm a Marylander, so I put Old Bay on everything, and Edgar Allan Poe's from there. So
right on.
And then you can find my podcast, Not Your Average Goat, on basically any platform that you listen to: Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. It's pretty much everywhere.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm glad we made this work.
Yes,
I love your energy and your passion, and yeah, definitely, storytelling's where it's at, and making that space. I'm sure like you just mentioned, I feel honored that, someone's willing to share with me. We should have that feeling of being honored that, so that someone's willing to feel safe in that space and share their story. So if you get that opportunity, don't pass it up, right? Listen to somebody's story. You'll never know what you hear. It's fascinating.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Teisha. I'm sure we'll talk again. I'm sure we could talk about other things for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Awesome. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for joining us for the Multiracialverse podcast. My name is Antonio Fernandez. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Huge shout out to my friend Johannes Skoda for mixing and creating the intro music, and DJ Kazam for the track.